How much do you think that self-doubt gets in your way? Do you believe in your abilities, both mundane and magical? Are you plagued by this persistent and nagging feeling of self-doubt? If you answer the latter, then you're not alone. Over the years, I've talked to many witches, and so many people tell me that the number one thing that stands in their way of their magical practice, their spiritual gifts, is this idea of self-doubt. So tonight, I'm going to share with you what I did to transform my self-doubt into self-belief. And I promise you that if you try some of what I share with you tonight, you can do the same. So, merry meet, welcome. I'm Aislin. This is Ask Aislin. And I am here tonight talking about the important role that self-belief plays in magic and honestly in life in general. So, just saying hi to those joining us. Welcome, everybody. Hello, I see Kurt's here in the chat. So if you're here live, definitely say something in the chat. I see Cindy's here as well, and Amy. Hi, everybody. Welcome, guys. And if you're here live, you can leave questions and comments. We'll have a Q&A at the end, and I'll also be watching the chat as we go. So we are going to just go ahead and dive right in. Okay, so I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about what we're going to talk about tonight. So this segment was actually supposed to be part of the episode from 2 weeks ago when I talked about the fire element. And I found that this was such an important topic that I really didn't want to squeeze it into just 5 minutes at the end of that episode. I wanted to give it its own episode because I think it's such an important topic. And so every once in a while, I ask a question in our Body Mind Witchcraft Facebook group, and it has different variations. So sometimes it'll say, what do you think is the biggest challenge in your spiritual practice? Other times it'll say, what's the biggest thing that's holding you up, or what's the biggest holdup when it comes to developing your psychic abilities and your intuition? And it's really is eye-opening when I look at all the answers. So usually we get, like about 80 or 90 responses will come in. And I was just looking at these last night. I had all these different posts pulled up over the last 2 years that were similar to this. And as I pulled them up, immediately the first things that come up is trusting myself. That's a response that I see a lot of, in believing in myself over and over and over again. And of course, there's other responses that people give, but these ones are repeated. And this is how I know that this is a big issue for people. Whenever we ask these questions, this is what people respond with. So, because of that, I feel that this is something that people need. This is something people crave, right? They want to know how they can change that self doubt into self belief. Now, I didn't always believe in myself. And of course, I also want to stress that it is a work in progress. We just don't go from like, okay, I've got self-doubt in myself and now all of a sudden I have self-belief. It's not just like a 180 switch that we make, but we do make a lot of progress over time. And a few years ago, I would have been the one listening to a talk like this. I wouldn't have been giving it. So just know that it can change quickly. And like I said at the beginning of the segment, if you try some of what I suggest today, I promise you that you are going to make some kind of changes in your life, okay? So then something changed for me, right? And this is what I'm going to share for you. I realized that I had to make a decision. And it sounds very simplistic, but I'm going to go through the story of how I did that. And then at the end, I'll share all the strategies I used. And I'm going to tell you more about my story in a moment. But for right now, I just wanted to talk a little bit about why self-belief is so important, why it's such a prevalent problem, especially in our communities among pagans and witches and Wiccans, why this is such a prevalent problem. And then I'm just saying hi to some others who are joining us. I see Amy's here, hi, and Rebecca, and Anthony's here, and Carla Anaya is here. So merry meet, everybody. So self-doubt is an energy that exists just like any other energy. And if we can truly understand that, that begins to give us the power to shift it, right? Because we know as witches that we can manipulate energy, we can work with elements, we can move energy through our bodies. We can move from energy from inside of our bodies out into objects when we charge them. We can draw energy up into our bodies from the earth. So if we believe this, if we truly understand that self-belief and self-doubt are two kind of opposing energies, all that we have to do is learn how to work with them, right? How to move them, how to change them. So this idea of self-doubt unfortunately exists in our collective, and it affects us whether we know it or not. So whether you know it or not, you are affected by the fact that we simply live in a collective that has a lot of self-doubt. Now, the collective places logic over intuition. It places the mundane over the magical, right? All you have to do is look around in the world, and it's very obvious that this is this is where the priorities are. It places development over nature, and in an effort to move progress forward, the collective detached itself from the sacred. And I think this is one of the biggest problems that we have. And so sometimes you'll hear people talk about the witch wound, and in a lot of ways, this resonates with this. It's, there's this deep unease that many of us feel because of what the collective has done, right? Because it's placing the priorities in the wrong areas. And we may not know that consciously, but at least we understand it unconsciously, and that's what causes to feel kind of that unease. And we can't really help it because we're tapped into this collective at all times. We can't really escape it. Um, so the other issue is, so everybody's going to be influenced by that. But then on top of that, there are some of us who were brought up in households by caregivers who either didn't acknowledge our gifts or how we were, or even worse, they didn't accept them. Maybe they would acknowledge them, but they wouldn't accept them. And because of this, many people were taught to suppress everything within them from an early age. So they might, we've talked about being an empath before. There are a lot of people who are very sensitive to energies who follow me. And I know that what a lot of people struggle with is kind of this idea of they've been told that they're too much, or they're too much energy, right? Too many emotions. You're just too much. But an additional part of that is that we may have been told that, like, the things that we thought were happening, the things that we thought we were seeing or we were experiencing, weren't really happening, because a lot of us could see through the veils, right? Could see the unseen, and maybe those around us didn't believe in it. And we're very impressionable when we're little, and so we learn very quickly to suppress it. So I'm going to tell you a story about myself as a little girl, and this really hits home how this happens to us, okay? And I'm sure that I'm not going to be the only one who has had an experience like this, okay? So when I was little, I um, I know now that I can see energy. And when I was a little kid, I didn't know that. I didn't grow up with a family that acknowledged any of this. There was nobody to support me. It was a very strict Christian family, and whether or not anybody had any abilities, nobody showed anything. And I could see energy. And so I remember I would talk about how everything is moving. Can't you see that everything's moving? And I would say that to my mom. And so she started taking me to these eye doctors, and because I said it's like in my eyes, like things are kind of like shaking, they're shifting, and what I was really seeing is I'm seeing the vibrations of energy, but nobody knows that back then. And I grew up in a small town in Indiana, and this stuff is just, nobody's heard of any of this. So she takes me to an eye doctor in Indiana, and they said everything's right with that kid's eyes. There's nothing wrong with her. And so they take me to another doctor a little bit further away, and eventually we end up at this, like, one of the best specialists at the University of Chicago, I believe, somewhere in Chicago. They say there's nothing wrong with this kid's eyes. So we're sent home with this message like, I can't trust what I'm seeing. I'm seeing something kind of vibrating, and I'm being told that that's not there and that I shouldn't trust myself because my eyes are totally fine. And so I kind of suppressed it. I ignored it for a while. It just became something that okay, things kind of vibrate, and but they're telling me that that's not real, and so I sort of suppressed that, right? So the story is unique to me, right? It's my own story, but I know that many of you have similar stories as well. So definitely, if you're here live or watching back later, share them in the comments. It can be very powerful to express our story and our truth, right? Especially if it's something you've never been able to talk about before. Um, and the if we fast forward to a couple of years ago, okay, so let's fast forward to a couple of years ago. So I went through a whole change, right? And I left Christianity. I realized I was a witch. I found that out pretty early in my late teens, early 20s, and kind of went on with my life for a while. I came out to LA. I started a coven here. I became a high priestess. I was doing all of this. And right around the pandemic is kind of when things started changing for me. Prior to this, I led the coven. But sometimes I felt like I was just going through the motions. And I think a lot of it had to do with my belief and my own practice. Like when I would lead people through rituals, people would come through and they would tell me what a transformative experience it was. But I myself, um, I felt pretty like lackluster in my own practice. But I have to do my practice. I'm the high priestess of this coven. Now, during the time, so shortly before the pandemic, I had a near fatal ectopic pregnancy, which basically turned my life upside down. And I began doing shadow work at that time. And the shadow work, I'm going to share this in a bit, is one of the keys to all of this. Is working through your shadow is one of the ways that you will dismantle your self-doubt. But I started doing that shadow work, and then in addition to it, it was the pandemic, and everybody was doing online trainings, and so I decided to get my advanced yoga training. And so when I started doing that, I started a regular breath work and energy moving practice. And up until that point, I'd been studying the chakras for probably 15 or so years, but I didn't dive into them like I did during this time. And this combo really is what the game changer was for me. I feel like I definitely enhanced my experience of the divine. My intuition increased it exponentially. This was very, very eye opening for me. Like it's like everything opened up. And I had frequent access to my higher self. This is something I barely could ever tap into, but I could frequently do it in ritual when all of this changed for me. But I was still plagued by the self-doubt. So even though all these really positive things were happening, I would question it. And I would say, is this real? Is this really happening? Am I really connecting to the goddess in this way? I would go to the ocean, I would hear her voice. Am I really hearing that? Am I making this up? I'm sure that some of you can relate to some of these questions too. Can I really trust my own experience? Now, think about it. We're going to talk in a moment about like where are all these voices coming from. These are all coming from the past. These aren't really me. But am I crazy? I mean, these are all the things that would go through my head. Now, around that time, I also started a program for fertility, and it was to kind of help me process the things that were going on during that ectopic pregnancy, and then hopefully help me get pregnant again. And so, during that process, I met this woman. Her name was Lauren, and she ran this fertility program. And Lauren has a very fascinating story. She's a yogi herself, and she tried to get pregnant for many, many, many years. Couldn't get pregnant. Tried everything. They flew to India. They got a donor egg. It didn't work. Spent all this money, and nothing really worked. And then something changed for Lauren. She was doing all of her yoga. She was doing her breath work because she's a yoga teacher, but she made this sort of like flip in her mind, and she's like, I, I have to like move this energy forward. What am I doing? What am I flying to India for this donor egg for? I'm a yoga teacher. I need to learn how to center and calm myself down. And so she got pregnant. She got pregnant at 45 years old with her own egg, no assistance at all, gave birth at 46 to a beautiful baby. And what I realized when I was listening to this story is like all these things she was doing, the yoga, the breath work, all of that, what it was doing was facilitating her self-belief, because there was this moment in her story where it switches and her belief became so strong. She knew she could do this. She knew she could get pregnant if she changed something about her body, and she did that, and she got pregnant. And so I'm not even sure if Lauren herself knows that it was that self-belief that did it, but it made me start thinking, if we can change our mind, if we can truly transform that self-doubt into self-belief, the impossible, or what looks like it's the impossible, becomes possible, and that's how she did it. Now it's not that simple. It sounds very simple the way I'm saying it, right? It's not exactly that simple, but in some ways it is. Because here's the deal: if you don't believe in yourself and your magic wholeheartedly, then I promise you, you will not be able to do this kind of work to its fullest potential. So if there's going to be nagging self-doubt and that's going to stay there and you're not going to work on that, you'll be able to progress. You'll progress through your studies and everything, but you will never be able to step into your fullest potential unless you transform this one thing. Now, when we enter our ritual space, when we do our magical practice, everything that we do is designed to move us one step closer to that self-belief. So if there is something that helps you believe in yourself, like recently we found this really nice apothecary and they sell these beautiful charged candles. They're just gorgeous with glitter and charms and everything in them. And lighting those in ritual, it just adds to the magic. Now, do we need the candle? Absolutely not. But does it help? Absolutely, because it gives us that sense of self-belief. So everything you're doing, so think about that. Everything you bring into your spells, everything you bring into your practice, is it fostering self-belief or is it taking away from it? And if it's taking away from it, then you don't want to do it. And if it's fostering the self-belief, then you do want to do it. So I see here, do we have a glitch here? Can somebody let me know? Have we lost the feed? Because it's Mercury retrograde. We're like 2 days away, and I was hoping we are going to keep the connection. Um, can someone in the chat let me know if the glitch is so bad that I need to start over, or is it okay? Just let me know, okay? And I'm going to keep going. Okay, so okay, thank you, Sabrina. Okay, so a couple of people said it's good on their end, fine on their end. Okay, so it may be on some people's, but gosh, every time Mercury retrograde comes, it's like all it's always a very, very slippery slope here with going live. Okay, great, everybody. Okay, thanks, guys. Okay, so let's keep talking about this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you tips and the strategies I used. And you don't have to use all of these, but it's something, some food for thought, something to think about, okay? And these are the very things that I did to move me towards the state that I got to, where I was able to kind of transform that self-doubt. Okay, so the first thing that you can do is work with the fire element. So I'm going to open up with this because this is what connects it to the previous episode or 2 episodes ago when I talked about the fire element. Now, the fire element is connected to the solar plexus, Manipura. For many people feel like this is the center of their energy system. It's located a couple of inches above the navel, okay? And it is connected to the element of fire. The element of fire of all the elements is the most transformative of all. If you think about physical fire literally changes one substance into a different substance. So it's not like we're, from a chemistry perspective, it's not like I'm putting salt in water and dissolving it and making it, do something like that. This is literally changing the molecules. It's taking things apart and making new molecules. So if fire can be so transformative physically, then it should be that transformative energetically as well. So there are many different ways that you can work with the fire element. So I do suggest, if you're interested in elemental work, if you're interested in working with the solar plexus, go back and check out a couple of previous episodes. I'll drop the links below afterwards. But here are the 2 episodes. There's one on the solar plexus. It's episode 65. You can find it on our Body, Mind, Witchcraft YouTube. And then we also have episode 86. That was 2 weeks ago, and that one's on the fire element. So in both of those episodes, I share a lot of strategies that you can use to work with the fire element and the solar plexus. So some simple ones are, we'll get into the breath work in a second, but watching your digestion is very good for the solar plexus and the fire element. You can bring in stones that are red in color, orange in color, yellow in color. You can bring in spicy foods if you can tolerate them, or at least like warming foods. So like cinnamon is very good. Like root vegetables can be good too. They tend to be like kind of warming foods. Comfort foods can often be in this category as well. So there's many different ways that we can do this. Getting out, being active. If you find that you're kind of on the couch and your energy is getting kind of lower, getting up, getting active, finding some way to move can also help with the solar plexus. So that would be our first start, is to work with the fire element, work with the the solar plexus. Now, after that, what I would recommend is that people have some kind of an activating breath work that they add into their practice, and or some kind of kundalini energy exercises, because what that will do is it'll start moving energy through the body. We're waking it up. We want to wake up the solar plexus. We want to wake up the energy in the body. When it starts to go stagnant, it's not moving well. And when it's not moving well, it's not as efficient in the system, which means like you want to transform something, you don't have as much energy behind it to transform it. So one of the best ways to work with self-doubt to really transform it is to use the breath to purify the mind. So breath work is very purifying of the mind. So if you're somebody who has the persistent kind of nagging voice in the head that's telling you, question this, question that, question yourself, this breath work can be a real game changer for you, and that's what I found. Now, activating breath work also activates the solar plexus. I want to share a couple with you. These are not new breaths if you followed me for a while. These are some of the same breaths I've talked about before. The first one is breath of fire, or sometimes called dragon's breath. It's a very simple breath. Easiest way to start is just act like you're fogging up a mirror. Put your hand on your belly. You're going to feel that kind of pulse of your belly. And then you want to close your mouth, and you'll be doing that exhale through the nose. So it's a quick staccato exhale. Don't worry about the inhale. It's just a passive inhale that comes in between the breaths. And it's just like, you got the hand on the belly, you'll feel that little pumping sensation. If it goes too fast, you slow it down. You can also speed it up as much as you want. Now, if you want to work to really kind of transform self-doubt, you really want to bring the fire element in, then what I recommend is you add the fire mudra to it as well. So you can do this two different ways. So one way is you'll interlace the fingers, bring the palms of the hands together, and put the thumbs up straight in the air like that. You can bring the mudra right to your solar plexus, and then you can do the breath there. See, the hands are like that. Now, the other way you could do it is you bring the hands apart, so it's just like giving thumbs up, and then you outstretch the arms like this, and you perform the breath that way. Okay, my hands are cut off from the camera, but I have them up in the thumbs up. Now, what I recommend that people do is do that breath for a minute to two to start out with. It can be kind of hard to keep the arms up in the air like this, but you try to do it. And this will begin to stimulate that fire energy in you. And again, that solar plexus is that transformation of, it can transform anything. This is where we can transform the self-doubt into self-belief. Now, another breath I've shared in the past is the panting breath. It looks a little weird. It's got a similar idea to it. All these breaths are activating, and that they're like stoking that internal fire. In the panting breath, we open up the mouth and you pant like a dog, okay? But it's going to have the same action in the belly. Now, what some people find is that it's kind of a cooling breath in the mouth, but it's an activating breath in the solar plexus, which is what we want. So you can pair that one in as well. So panting breath. And then we have another breath that is called, I call it like cannon breath with 3 sips in. So it's just what you'll do is you will take a kind of a 3-part inhale breath, where you're sipping in, like you're going to imagine like you were sipping in air through a straw, and you're going to sip in like about a third of your breath, and then another third of your breath, and then the final third of your breath. And then on the out breath, you're going to make kind of like an explosive exhale, like a cannon. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like. So I'm going to take the 3 sips in, and then see how I kind of open up the mouth in like an O, and then it's exhale kind of forcefully, and then you would start it again. And if you do it a couple of times, you're even going to feel it. You have to use the diaphragmatic muscles here to do it, and that is stimulating our solar plexus, the fire element, as well. So those 3 breaths are very good. You can alternate them on different days. You can add them, kind of stack them together and make a small practice together. Any of those breaths is great. And then another thing I really like is a kundalini energy exercise that people will often use for manifestation. That's how I usually teach it. But I think why it has such a good role in manifestation is that it stimulates self-belief. And so if we want to manifest something, it's really hard to manifest something if we don't believe in it, right? If we don't believe in ourselves. So this exercise, very simple. So you put your hands out here. We sometimes call this like cactus arms, goalpost arms. You'll take an inhale, and then on the exhale, you're going to bring your hands together. They don't quite touch. I kind of think of it like I'm making almost like I don't maybe a portal or like just like a window to look through. And it's like kind of imagine like the target, the thing that we're trying to get, right? We're trying to manifest is in that window. So it looks like so it's inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, and then I'm doing all of the inhale and the exhale through my nose. If you are not able to breathe through your nose, then do it through your mouth. The nose is usually preferable if you can, okay? And so that is something that you can do this exercise for a minute, 2 minutes, and then add that into the breath work, and you could have yourself a nice little 5-minute practice that would be designed to not only just balance your energy, but to change your self doubt, to transform it. If you try that 5 minutes on most days, I promise you a lot of things are going to change for you. When I did this practice alone, my self belief, like I was kind of at a low point when I was doing that, and I was getting ready to sell a course, and I did that, and my sales were good, surprised even me. And so a lot of it is attributed to that self belief, right? We put that self belief behind anything, and it's going to just add to that energy. Okay, now let me see if anybody's got anything in the chat. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions or comments, anything if you've tried any of these before and it's worked or didn't work, let me know. I'm going to talk about the next thing. So the next thing is so simple that many people don't even try it. And the people who do try it, because I know I've got feedback from people who said I've been doing that all the time and it's really helping. So this is called tapping in the energy of self-belief. So I do this every single time before I turn on the camera. I do this because it's not easy getting up on the camera like this in front of people. When I first did this, I started doing this like almost 2 years ago. My mouth would get dry. I could barely talk. There'd be like nobody here. You're talking to like nobody, right? And that monkey mind is going with all the doubts. I shouldn't do this. I should get off. I'm messing up the words. Nobody's watching. Nobody's listening, right? Just, you know, the track that goes on and on and on. And so I started doing this exercise. It was already an exercise that I was doing before my rituals, and it helped a lot as well because I had that kind of that same narrative running through my head when I was doing my rituals. Like, is this real? You know, am I making this up? Am I crazy? Right? All the crazy thoughts that we think that get in our way, all of that self-doubt. And so I started doing this. And so what you do is you tap on the top of your head. And I usually just tap, and then 3 times we're going to say, I'm calling in the energy of self-belief. I'm calling in the energy of self-belief. I'm calling in the energy of self-belief. And then you move to the third eye. I'm calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief. And then move to the throat chakra. I'm calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief. And then move to the heart, calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief. And then we bring it down to the solar plexus. So this is the most important one here, calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief. And then you move to your sacral chakra. That's just like a little bit below your navel, calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief, calling in the energy of self-belief. And then just imagine drawing all that energy down into the very base of your spine at your root chakra and have it settle there. And so it seems so simple that many people won't even try it. But those who've tried it and they do it consistently, you don't just do this one time and say, okay, it did or it didn't work. It's like you got to do it consistently. And over time, it greatly changes your viewpoints, it starts to silence some of those doubts. It's just really incredible. Because like what I said before, self-belief is just an energy, just like any other energy. So why not call it in? We call in the elements. We call in the deities, We call in all kinds of other energy. Why not call this one in too? In fact, why not call it in before we do anything else? Because remember what I said in the beginning, everything that you do in your practice should be designed to move you one step closer to like pure self-belief, right? So that is that exercise. So try it. And I'd love to hear if anybody here has tried it before. I know that some people have given me feedback that they've been doing it and it works. But if anybody's tried it before, or is going to try it, let me know. And look at Sabrina said she does the tapping very often. Yeah, she did daily lately. Yeah, it works. It really, really does make a huge change if we try it. Now, the next idea is shadow work. So shadow work is going to help you in a lot of ways. Now, this is more of a long-term strategy. So the tapping in the self-belief, working with your breath, working with the solar plexus and the fire element, all that you can get started with that right now, and that's going to make big shifts, okay? So, but some of those shifts are going to feel a little bit temporary unless we get underneath it all, and we have to figure out where all of the thoughts are coming from. So that voice I talked about before that I know that you all have too, your voice says different things than mine, but it's got some kind of repetitive negative narrative going on about your abilities, right? And your worth and all those different things. So when we do our shadow work, this will help us transform those persistent doubts and those limiting self beliefs, those limiting thoughts. It's going to help transform those because number one, we're going to trace them back to where they came from. We're going to try to figure out whose voice it was. So if I trace my own back, everybody else will have different answers when they do this. When I trace mine back, it tends to go back to my mom, but probably to my dad. And this idea of like magic isn't real. It's always been like confusing to me is how people can be Christian and really believe in that, but then say that our spirituality or our religion isn't real. It's always very confusing to me. But that was the home that I grew up in. And so there was this narrative that magic isn't real. I'm stupid to believe in these things. I remember in probably like my early 30s or something, going to this restaurant here in LA with my boyfriend at the time, and my parents were there. And there was it was a new age, there was a new age shop that was kind of attached to this restaurant, which was also very kind of new agey. And I was in there looking for some stones, and my dad pulled my boyfriend aside at the time, and he said, I just don't know why someone so smart like her believes in all this nonsense. So look at that narrative, right? So it's no wonder that those thoughts are going on in our head because this is what people said to us when we were growing up. I know that I'm not alone in this. And another thing that I discovered in my own shadow work too is I have a lot of issues with my aunt was very severely bipolar, and she died a few years ago. She crossed through the veils, but she was always very bipolar to the point that she couldn't really live in society in a good way. And so I always had this fear that maybe what I was experiencing just made me crazy like her. Like they all said, oh, she's just crazy, right? And so I was worried that maybe this is me crazy too. Um, but if we start to realize that that voice isn't ours, it's not my voice saying magic isn't real. I believe magic is real. Look at my bookcase. Look at look, you all believe that too, right? Or you wouldn't be on this path. It's not your voice. It's not my voice saying it. It's somebody else's voice. The sooner that you can figure out whose voice that is, the better, because that voice has no real authority and it has no power over your life. The shadow work will help you figure this out. It will help you release the attachments that you have to all kinds of limiting ideas like that. Of course, it's not easy to do. I've said this before, it takes a lot of time. So this would be like I said, this is a long-term strategy. But remember that this is soul work too. So we can't really expect soul work to be really fast. So the best thing that you can do is, do the things I talked about earlier, and I'm going to share a few other strategies you can get started on right now, but do the shadow work underneath it. Get going with that, get started with that, or do it when the opportune time comes. But remember that you must be patient think the Temperance card. It came up in our reading today in Body, Mind, Witchcraft. The Temperance card tells us to balance ourselves and be patient. Those are the two big, like, foundational uh, stones of shadow work and of your development of your own self-belief. So balance yourself, find proper balance in your life in whatever way that means, and then be patient. Okay, so let's talk about two more strategies, and then we'll open up for the Q&A, okay? And if anybody has any questions, comments, put them in the chat here. So this next idea is called pratyahara, and I'm going to break that into words that we understand, but pratyahara is one of the 8 limbs of yoga. It basically translates into turning towards something. So it's basically you're turning inward. What we would probably say in the West is this is just simply sensory withdrawal. Now, the idea behind this, it's actually, I should say the translation is gathering inward, and then we would say it's more like sensory withdrawal. It's basically tuning out the outside world is a really good way of thinking about it. Now, I wanted to tell you a bit about a full moon ritual that I once did using pratyahara. And the reason I did this is because our ritual and our magic, it all takes place on the etheric plane. The etheric plane isn't here. And what a lot of people kind of think about is the etheric plane is like a layer on top of the physical plane that we're on. So it's here, but it's not here, right? So we got to kind of travel to get there. And so casting the circle, doing things like that, a lot of people, outside of the circle being cast for protection, the other main reason it's being cast is to basically delineate this space as being outside of space and time, basically in the etheric plane, which is between the veils. And often what happens is our self-doubt kind of gets in the way. Even if it's an unconscious doubt, it's going to get in the way, and it's going to make it hard for us to really understand how to cross through those veils, or how to be between them, how to be in that etheric plane. And what happens is when we're in the etheric plane, you can't rely on your external senses. So we've got the eyes open, like our physical external senses, the eyes are open. They can see that I'm still sitting in my room, but yet I'm trying to convince myself that I'm on the etheric plane, right? Because that's where my magic is taking place. So my eyes are oftentimes going to get in the way. So if you find that you have trouble, so like when you're in your magical practice, you have some trouble getting into it, or you have the nagging doubt, try to use your etheric senses instead of your physical ones. Now, the Bhagavad Gita, which is the classic Sanskrit text, says that the physical senses are like a boat on water. And when the senses are triggered by anything outside externally happening, the boat sways. Okay, so what that means is I kind of imagine myself standing on the beach doing a ritual, right? And I've cast my circle and I'm going towards the etheric plane. And then I'm distracted by the things that are happening around me with my physical eyes. The physical eyes can actually keep us from getting to the etheric plane and staying there. So closing your eyes during meditation, I'm sure many of you know that helps. It's a lot easier to meditate when you close your eyes, right? What about closing our eyes when we're doing ritual? So this is something to try. That way it forces us to use the etheric eyes, not the physical ones. So try performing your ritual with your eyes closed or even slightly closed, because I was out like on the beach and I don't know, I just couldn't fully close. I'm like, if you're in your bedroom, you feel much safer. You can try to fully close your eyes and maybe try to feel your way around as you're doing the ritual. Make it really simple so that you don't have to do anything hard or get up or move or anything like that. Or just have them partially closed so that we're blocking out some of what's going on in the outside world. This can be a very powerful experience of a ritual. So I highly recommend that you try it. It may not be for you, but some of you may just fall in love with it. But it will be a way that you may find that you get deeper into this ritual than you ever have before when you try it. Okay, so let me talk about, I've got one more suggestion to share with you, and then we'll go to the Q&A. So this final suggestion is what I call tenacious self-belief. It's a working title. I'm not really wild about the word tenacious, but It's basically unwavering self-belief. Like we just have to make a decision that we're going to change this about ourselves and we're going to do it fully. Like we're all in. So at the end of the day, you can do all the things I suggested, but you have to figure out how to make the switch in your mind. Like, are you going to continue being plagued by your self-doubt? Or are you going to do something about it? That's what you need to make a change here. You need to make that decision. And that's something that I realized is that I needed to make that decision because I was doing my shadow work. My intuition was increasing exponentially, like I said. My connection to the goddess was deeper than ever. My higher self was communicating to me. I was accessing it so easily, but yet I was still plagued by this doubt. So I made a deal with myself. And I said, I'm never, ever going to believe in myself unless I do something about it. So I decided that I would make a deal and that I'm going to believe in myself from now until the end of the cycle. And unless something or somebody comes in and they negate what I've done or I've said, or I get evidence from outside that what I've done or I've said or I am experiencing or feeling isn't what I think it is, then I will be open to that. But otherwise, I'm not going to be listening anymore to that negative doubt. I'm not going to be listening to the monkey mind anymore. That's not going to be what's going to derail me. Okay. So sometimes making this deal with yourself, maybe a cycle sounds like a really long time. Like if you're super plagued by doubt, you may not even get through a day before it's all going, right? So you can make a deal with yourself for just today. I'm going to believe in what's happening, okay? Unless evidence comes in and then shows me that it's not real or it's not true. But like I said, most of the time it's not. So I made that little deal with myself. I said, I'll believe in myself until someone or something proves me wrong. And what I found is most of the time, nobody comes along to do that because it's your own doubts, it's your own mind that's doing it. It's not other people. Most of the time, it's just you. So if you falter when you're doing this, so let's say you get going, you're gung-ho, you're doing it, and then you just get plagued by that doubt again, that's fine. Just start the experiment over. Just say, tomorrow, I'm going to do it. I'm going to start at the beginning of the day. I'm going to believe in myself and what's going on and what I'm doing in my magical practice and my mundane life. I'm going to believe in myself till the end of the day. If you get derailed, start it over the next day. Eventually, you'll be able to extend this longer. You'll be able to do it for a week, for a month. This is what I did. It sounds so simple, but when people have tried it, it really works. And but it is, remember, you have to remember it's a work in progress. You will get derailed. You'll have to pick yourself back up. But you got to kind of make the decision. Do you want to change this or not? Because anything big that you want to change in your life, you can't change it unless you make some big difference in your life, right? So it really does work. Now, here's the thing. Can you achieve everything this way? I'm not going to lie. No, you can't. You're not going to make everything happen this way necessarily. But you can achieve more of what you want in your life, more of what you desire, if you start to change the way that you think about this. And if you really get on board with transforming your self-doubt into self-belief, you will change your life and you will change it for the better. Now, can you achieve what you want without your self-belief? Maybe, but probably not. It's going to be that much harder. If we believe we can't do something, we probably can't. And if we believe that we can do something, we very likely may be able to do it, or at least be able to do something like it, right? This is how I climb mountains. Sometimes I look at the mountain and I think, how in the world am I going to get up that thing? And then I just keep reminding myself that I can do it. I can climb the mountain, and then I climb the mountain. When I get overwhelmed and I want to give up. It's hard to run a spiritual business. It's hard to grow Facebook groups and YouTube and all of this. It's overwhelming, and it would be so easy to give in. But I just think to myself, if that self-doubt comes, if it takes over, if it tips over, that's where everything's going to fall apart, right? But if I keep my self-belief up, if I keep working on it, and when I falter, I add in extra breath work, and I do the tapping in the self-belief, and I do my self-belief experiment, then I'm going to be able to move myself forward from that moment on. So Um, like I said, it can sound simple. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's super easy, but if you make the intention and you call in self belief, it does come in some form. And over time, it comes more and more and more. So you got to make the choice to shift this in your life. And then when you do that, there's very, very little that can stop a witch who truly believes in their magic. All right? So blessed be. Now I am going to open this up for the Q&A. The You don't have to ask things about self-belief. We could ask anything about witchcraft, magic, shadow work. I'm going to go into the chat and see if I've missed anything here. So, Anthony has said, I've done it, love it, especially before my past life regression. Yes. Um, Are you talking about the tapping? I don't know if you're talking about the tapping or one of the or maybe the breath work. But I do. So anything you're doing, like something like a past life regression, would be a really good place to bring in some of this. So like especially like past life regression can be hard for people because you really do have to be open to what is coming up. You really can't question it. You just have to be open to what's coming up. And if you're constantly questioning what's coming up, you won't get anything from it, right? So what Anthony is saying is doing something that's going to foster self-belief before a past life regression is very, very smart. So it can be the breath work, it can be mudras, hand gestures, the tapping, any of that. Okay, let's see what else here is in the chat. So Nancy said, you are not alone, and now I know that I'm not either. You know what? For a long time, I did think I was alone, and I wouldn't even talk about this because I figured this was just me. I was embarrassed. I hid it. I was like, am I the only one that is having doubts about everything? You know, even when I was, you know, I've been a high priestess for years. And then I started talking to people, and I'm like, well, a lot of people experience this, right? So it's good that we get this out in the open so that we can make changes. Amy said she's going to try the breathing and the tapping. Yeah, try it. Right. I mean, honestly, too, this is what I said to myself, too, when I started that tenacious self-belief exercise or experiment is like, really, what have you got to lose? Do you have anything to lose by trying this? No, you have everything to gain. You have nothing to lose. If it doesn't work, whatever, go try something different, right? But I'd be surprised that a person who tried some of this didn't find something shift for them. Kurt said, I got to the point where I know what you do not need all the fancy extras for the altar. The magic will be the same because it comes from the earth, God, goddess, and the universe. And I think that the part too that we sometimes forget is that it comes from ourselves too. So, and that is part of fostering the self-belief as well, is like one of the things, this is something I actually meant to bring up in the talk and forgot. So I'm glad that this question kind of made me remember it. But the if you think about like Christianity, or think about at least my version of Christianity when I considered myself Christian, we do a lot of praying, and I remember there was like, you know, the time when like What Would Jesus Do came out, like the WWJD, and everybody wore the bracelets, and there was a whole series of other bracelets that were out and with acronyms, and one of them was Frog, fully rely on God, and then another one was Push, pray until something happens. And I remember when I became a witch, I sort of looked at that idea, pray until something happens, very passive, right? It's putting everything in somebody else's hands. And I think where people fail, like prayer has a huge benefit, but you know what I really think the benefit is that it makes people believe in what they're praying in. I think there's an element of that people don't really understand. So our magic, right? We don't need the fancy stuff. The fancy stuff helps us get in the mindset. It can foster self-belief. Like I said, anything you do should be there to help foster that sense of self-belief, but you don't necessarily need it. And the magic does come from the earth, God, goddess, the universe. It's all there, and then it also comes from you. Okay, let's see here. And then. Um, Okay, Colleen said, I wanted to be a witch since my teens, but being raised a Catholic and practicing evangelical Christianity well into adulthood made me try to silence that pull. Many people are going to relate to what you're saying. Ever since I made the decision to embrace being a witch, that self-doubt has been a constant. Yes, and that is very common too. So I'm going to normalize that for you. So being in this space has been so healing. I'm going to really start working on my self-belief. Yes. So being in spaces like this is so helpful because we have other people struggling with the same things. And here we have a lot of people coming out tonight and saying, I struggle with this too. Many people, this may be the first time admitting it. Others of you have probably talked about it before. But yeah, I mean, that is you are not alone, Colleen. I've talked to other people and shadow seekers who've said the same thing. Other people in the larger body mind witchcraft group as well said when they came to the path, the doubt became constant. Okay, and so then what we need to do is we need to be constantly vigilant against the doubt. Okay, until the doubt gets transformed. So I still have doubt. I still do, but it's nothing like it used to be. And I couldn't have gotten to where I got without these practices. And then Anthony said same. It took till 48. Yeah, and it's never too late to come to the path. It's never too late to transform your self-doubt. You may have been a witch on the path since you were 20 and you're still plagued by doubt. It's never too late to change this. Okay, so I know I got a couple of questions here that Anthony and Katie, I have your questions already written down. I'm going to answer yours and both of yours in just a second. And let me just see if there's anything else here. So Nancy said, thank you for sharing that because after years of being in my Reiki practice and in our craft, my self-doubt creeped in and it's been haunting me. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad I found you in this group. Yeah, I'm so glad you found us too. I'm so glad all of you found us. Yes, it creeps in. It'll creep in at different times, and it's totally normal. So now you have tools to combat it, and you have people to talk to. Reach out in the Body Mind Witchcraft group. Reach out in Shadow Seekers. I know Nancy's in Shadow Seekers too. Sonia said, I finally believed I was a witch and felt comfortable calling myself that yesterday after some meditation and ritual, probably the full moon. The full moon will do a lot to shift that, yeah. So, and that alone, right? That little shift there too, that helps foster your self-belief. And then Sonia said she wants to learn Reiki. Energy work is definitely next for me. Yeah, so definitely dive into some of the chakras, and that will get you started. Getting a really good foundation of the basics of the chakra system is very good for so a good foundation for Reiki as well. Yeah. Okay, so let me go answer a couple questions that were sent to me. Okay, and then if anybody's got any other questions, put them in the chat. We got time for those too. Okay, so Anthony has a great question. I know that other people will kind of wonder how you go about this. So he said, I want to come out of the broom closet, but I'm not sure how. Did you ever make an announcement, or will people catch on after a bit? So I think it's a very personal decision for everyone. So some people choose to come out, and some people choose to stay in. Some people choose to be partially out. That's where I'm at. I'll tell you a little bit about that. It's always a different things to weigh in on to figure out what part of that you are going to be. So what I want you to know is that you don't have to come out of the broom closet to be a witch. So sometimes people think like, I've got to do this or I'm not really a witch. You don't have to be. I have to be partially in the broom closet because of my family. And I wish that I could yell it from the mountaintops, and living here in LA makes it pretty much easier for me to do it than it did when I was in Indiana, for example. But in some places, and for some people, it's not going to be safe to come out of the broom closet. So people have to weigh that. You know, if you live in a place where you can't come out, you could still be a witch and be in. And, you know, I saw somebody in a different group that I followed the other night, and she was saying that they lived in a very small town, and it really wasn't safe for them to wear a pentacle or anything. And her husband had bought her a necklace of a cicada. because he had read that it was a symbol of witches, and of transformation, and the hidden becoming, the unseen becoming seen. And so she was wearing that into her, or she was going to wear that. She had a little struggles with it, but um, it was a good way to have a symbol that she could use that she knew meant witch to her, but other people where it wasn't safe to express that didn't know. So I'm off on kind of on a little tangent, but I'm just kind of normalizing it for anybody who can't come out of the broom closet because of safety. Just know that's okay. It's totally okay. Uh, Other people, other times, it's not about safety, it's about hurting other people. So I had this teacher when I was in not grad school, I was in undergrad. He was my art history teacher. He was a druid. He saw my pentacle, kind of called me out in class, and was a great mentor to me over time. And he was like a leader of his druid's grove that he was part of. He had written books that he couldn't publish. That was very interesting. He wrote these books about druidism that he couldn't publish, and it was because of his Catholic mother. And he said it would break her heart if he came out and published that book, and he was going to wait until she died and then he would publish it. So, everybody comes to this. There's no right or wrong way to do this. Everybody comes to it when they come to it and how they come to it. Some will make an announcement. It can be very liberating. So if you feel that that's the energy that you're in, like there's a lot of excitement, and you want to make that announcement and you feel safe and there doesn't seem to be any negative things to it that it would be holding you back, totally, you make an announcement. Social media makes that really easy, right? But alternatively, like you had mentioned, would people just like catch on after a bit? Yes. The right people will catch on, and then a lot of times it goes right over the wrong people's heads. They don't even know it. Sometimes I would get very concerned about wearing my pentacle places, because especially if it's a place where like people might be not as friendly towards it, and sometimes people don't even know what that is. So there's also ways to get pentacles that are a little bit less obvious. Like this one is a circle with like a star sort of dangling inside of it. So it looks a little less like a pentacle. It kind of goes right over some people's heads. But if you want to, have a coming out and come out of the broom closet, absolutely make an announcement. It's really, I think the most important advice I have for you is just ask yourself, what's most important to you? Is it going to be liberating to have the kind of coming out announcement, or not, right? And that's going to determine how you do it. But yeah, you can do it through making the announcement, but people will catch on after a while too. And I know, like, Anthony, I'm friends with you on Facebook, and I've seen your posts. And well, actually, I don't know about your public ones. I know in our group it would be very obvious that you're a witch, but it's up to you what you decide to share, kind of like in the public side. And you don't have to do it all at once either. You can do it a little at a time. Okay, so I hope that helps. Now, Katie's question was about a return to sender spell. And let me make sure that was the same one she asked here. Yeah, return to sender spells if they're unethical. So she said, are return to sender spells unethical if a specific person or witch is throwing negative energy your way? Yeah, okay. So if you know that someone is throwing energy your way, here's the way I look at it. Well, first of all, let's back up and talk about the ethics anyway. So ethics is a matter for the individual. There's really not there's no governing body that says what's right or what's wrong for witches. It's up to you what you feel comfortable with. So the real question is, how will it make you feel to do the spell? So if it's going to make you feel good about doing it, then I would do it. If it's going to if you have reservations about it, you think it's going to make you feel worse, there are other ways that you can do it. But here are my thoughts on the return to sender spell. A general return to sender spell is a self-defense spell, which is different than like a hex, which would be considered an offensive spell. So I'm not talking about like the ethics of it at all. I'm just saying these are two different kinds of spells. So if you would defend yourself physically from someone, why wouldn't you defend yourself energetically, right? So kind of think about it. If somebody had come up to you and they were going to punch you, you would put up your hands, and that's the return to sender spell. It's deflection, right? So that's sort of the way I feel about it. And so then also seeing the rest of your question, which is that you suspect or you know that someone's actually, a witch is actually sending you negative energy, why not try the return to sender spell? Now, if for any reason you feel that something doesn't feel good about that, you can always just do shielding, because what a return to sender spell essentially is you put up the shield, but it's a shield that basically deflects back, as opposed to regular shielding, which is just defense, right? That's just defense, and it doesn't deflect it back. So that would be my two thoughts. I guess I'd ask you like how you feel about it, but I think, ethically, um, it's really up to you. But it's considered self-defense. I wouldn't consider it offensive. I don't see anything unethical with a return to sender spell if it's going to help. And it can be challenging when it feels, or that someone is sending you negative energy. That can be tough. There is another thing that you can do that just kind of came to my mind is that there, Katie is local to LA, and I will send you the name of an apothecary where you can get these candles that are kind of like undoing. So if you suspect somebody has done a working against you, these candles will break it. I will send you a link for that. Okay. Unfortunately, the place does not do that I know of. They don't mail order them, so you'd have to be local to LA to be able to go. But Katie is. Okay, so I hope that helps. But if you have any other parts of the question, let me know for sure. Okay, I have one more question here, and let me see if there's anything else in the chat. Um, okay, it's so kind of jumping around here. Okay, Katie said she was worried about the rule of three with sending energy out there, but return to sender is just sending back energy that's already been out there. Exactly, yeah. And a lot of times, the rule of three is, and Katie is a part of my coven, and we are a Wiccan coven, and so, our take on the rule of three is that it it's energy. It's not so much that, okay, this energy is like coming back to you, like anything you do is coming back to you, but it can affect you. So sometimes people, what I always say to people is think about how it's going to affect you emotionally, and how it's going to affect you energetically. It's not so much that like, okay, this negative energy is coming back on me, but like how is it going to affect me emotionally? How is it going to affect me mentally? That's what I worry about more with doing that kind of stuff. Yeah. Okay. Um, but yes, it is more sending back the energy that's already been put out there. Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, I had one more question here. Let me find it. This one is from Kurt. Okay, so Kurt had said, if you want to commune with the ancestors, what's the best and the safest way? So it kind of depends on what ancestors you want to work with. So if you want to work with, really with any kind of type of work, you want to work with ancestors, you want to work with deities, you want to work with elementals, you set the intention. That's the starting point. Setting the intention is a big deal, and that alone can often be enough for many people. First, you want to figure out what ancestors you want to work with. So these could be ancestors from your current life, the life that you're living right now in this incarnation. These can be ancestors from past lives. So you don't have all the same ancestors life to life. We don't just incarnate in the same family over and over and over again. Some do, some don't. I know that I didn't. And then other ancestors that you could work with are like the mighty dead. And so since Kurt is, I know that Kurt, I believe you've read some Christopher Penczak books, but this book here, this is called The Mighty Dead by Christopher Penczak. I highly recommend this book for anybody who wants to do some ancestral work, in particular with the ancestors of the witches. So Christopher Penczak goes through, this is called Communing with the Ancestors of Witchcraft. So he goes through and he talks about different kind of ancestors we have. There are ancestors of the land that we live on. Those can be ancestors of the witches, and so learning about the peoples who lived on the land where you live, and the kind of deities that they had. Those ancestors can be worked with. He also talks about like anybody who are like ascended masters or people who are witches that came before you. They cross through the veils and they continue to do the work over there, and they can be called in to aid us. And so one of the things that he recommends is he says to place a stool or like some seated area in your magical circle that invites any ancestor of the witches to come. The ancestors don't have to be of blood. These can just be other witches, because you are a witch in a long chain of witches throughout history. And so I highly recommend this book. I remember in a book circle, we read this around Samhain. It was a great time to read it, but you can read it anytime. And it's got so much information, different rituals you can do. It talks about what the mighty dead are, the different levels of it in different pagan traditions. He talks about the ancestors of the physical land you live on. So highly recommend that book, Mighty Dead by Christopher Penczak. So once you have decided which ancestors you're working with, whether they're your own from this life, a past life, or the mighty dead, then I think the simplest thing is set the intention and then build an altar, an ancestral altar of some kind, or leave an offering for your ancestors. It's like an invitation that I would like to connect. So your offering can be photos, mementos. If it's somebody that you knew, let's say it's somebody you knew in life who has crossed through the veils, photos, mementos, favorite foods of that person. Perhaps it's somebody that you didn't know, but you have heard. Maybe it's an ancestor in your ancestral line. If you can find out stuff about them, what did they like, then you can leave that as an offering too. The other thing is you can simply ask that ancestor, set an intention and ask that ancestor what they would like. And then you got to really have some self-belief here. Listen for the first thing that comes into your mind and don't second guess it. And then that becomes the offering. And then, of course, there are like standard offerings like milk, wine, honey, coins, flowers. These are just like standard offerings. So unless we know that a specific person didn't like these things, we wouldn't want to offer it to them. But these are standard offerings. So I think that's my best advice is like, you need to make the connection, you need to set the intention, and then you need to do something that invites them to start the conversation. And then once they do, sometimes they will start to guide you as well. But you will get some ideas from that Mighty Dead book as well on maybe some rituals or different like practices you can do. So I hope that helps. I know you asked about like the safest way. I don't really, when contacting the ancestors, I don't worry too much about safety. It's not something I would worry about with ancestors, especially if you're contacting your own, or the mighty dead for that matter, because these are like ascended witches. So I wouldn't worry about safety. It's just a matter of how are you going to connect, and that's usually by setting the intention, kind of letting them know, hello, I'm here, and I'd like to connect. Okay. Oh, so I see that people are like, other people want the address for the apothecary. Yeah, I will, I will send it to other people too. Maybe I can post it somewhere. Okay, and then Kurt said dumb suppers at Samhain. Yes, and a dumb supper at Samhain is great, and so you don't have to just do it at Samhain either. You can leave an offering. I know witches who leave a bit of their food, a bit of their meal every day on an altar for an ancestor. So it's really just about making the connection and knowing you don't have to wait till Samhain. And to be honest with you, right now the veils are pretty thin anyway. It's nearing Beltane, and this is the flip side of the wheel. So it's a different kind of thinning of the veils. The veils thin so more life comes into this plane. At Samhain, the veils thin so more life can leave, but its veils are thin. So it is a good time to connect to ancestors right now. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what's coming up. That way, if anybody has any last minute questions, I see I'm already over an hour, so I'm going to get out of here soon. Let me tell you what's coming up, but it gives you some space to ask any more questions that you have. So Beltane is coming up. We're about to move into Beltane season. So next Wednesday on 5/1, I'm going to do an episode on Beltane. I'll share with you some ways to celebrate. Remember that Beltane isn't one singular day, it's a seasonal energy. So you'll have some ideas that will take you through the next 4 weeks and really get you into the energy of Beltane. On 5/5, we have our special Beltane ritual coming up. That's Sunday 5/5. Our Shadow Seekers members and our Covenant of Midnight's Flame members and initiates, they all get tickets to that ritual. If you aren't a part of one of those groups, you can purchase tickets through donation. Look for a link later on, probably this weekend. We'll start selling the tickets. This is an awesome ritual. We did it last year. We're doing it again, but making it even better this time. And we are going to meet Hecate, and we are going to journey with her to a sacred grove where she is going to help us open the doors to different versions of ourselves. You'll get to meet a past version of yourself. You get to meet a future possible version of yourself. You'll get to connect to your higher self, your inner child. It's a really awesome ritual. So I hope you guys will attend. And then after that, 5/8, I'm planning to do an episode on the spirit element, but I have dental work scheduled that day. So trying to get that figured out. If that doesn't work out, the episode will be on 5/15, but we do have an episode on the spirit element coming up that will then close out the elements. We've been working through all the different elements that will close that out. And then we have a free public full moon ritual coming up on Wednesday, 5/22. That's like in about a month, about 4 weeks from now. This is one of the probably most transformative rituals that we do. This is Kali's ritual, transforming, burning, it's called burning away self-doubt. Oh, that's not what it's called, but you can burn away your self-doubt. Burning away negativity and fear, negative emotions and fear. So it's an awesome ritual, and it will give you a taste of what we do inside the Shadow Seekers membership, and then our doors will be opening to new members. And that is something I was going to mention too, is that, if you heard a lot of stuff today that you loved, we take this another step in our Shadow Seekers membership. So consider joining us and going a little deeper with us there. And we'll be open in about 4 weeks after that ritual. We'll be open for a week, and then we'll be closed again. So it'll be a good chance to join us then. All right, I don't see any other questions in the chat, but if I missed anything, you guys can always reach out to me, message me, Aislin Lumen. You can email me, aislinlumen@bodymindwitchcraft.com, or message me. And Anthony said, join us. It's so good. Yes, Anthony's in Shadow Seekers, and we have a lot of people in there making a lot of big transformations. All right, well, I am going to sign off. I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening, and until next time, blessed be.